Thank you, Ben Whiting, for pulling together that terrific video, and thanks to the entire National Writers Series staff for all that you do behind the scenes. Good evening and welcome to the National Writers Series. My name is Lisa Thalvet and I'm a board member of the NWS. I'm also a comedic improviser and a Montessori consultant who loves how stories can inspire and enlighten people from all walks of life. It is my pleasure to introduce Chasten Buttigieg, who recently published his uplifting memoir, I Have Something to Tell You. You likely know Chasten from his speeches on the campaign trail for his husband, Pete Buttigieg, who ran for president. You might also know that he grew up right here in Traverse City, Michigan, and attended school here. Chasten's memoir recounts his journey of finding acceptance as a gay man after some tough times growing up in our conservative community and coming out to his family and friends, some who were less than accepting. You'll find his story honest and relatable, especially for anyone in their 20s trying to pay back a mountain of college debt while finding their way in the world. Chasten studied drama at Wisconsin Eau Claire and earned his master's in education from DePaul University. He has worked as a busboy, dog walker, nursing assistant, waiter, cashier, bartender, and most recently, a middle school drama and humanities teacher. He lives in South Bend, Indiana with his husband, Pete, and their 2 rescue dogs. Our guest host tonight is Alon Cameron, who has more than 25 years of organizing experience and co-founded Up North Pride, the largest participant-driven LGBTQ+ march in Michigan. She's a powerful force for good, a writer, artist, healer, and mystic. We are so glad so many of you are joining us tonight. So to ask a question, just go to the chat button at the bottom of your screen and we'll get to as many questions as we can. So now, sit back, relax, pour yourself a glass of your favorite beverage, and welcome into your home, Chasten and Alon.
So welcome, Chasten. I'm so happy to have you here at the National Writers Series, and especially to know that you're back here in Northern Michigan.
Yes. Yeah, I love it.
I couldn't help but wonder how much, if that was influenced at all, you know, selfishly from my own perspective, by your experience of coming to Pride, if that had an impact on you with regard to the decision. I know that you and Pete bought a vacation home up here, and I wondered how much of an effect that had.
Well, I mean, Pride last year with you, I mean, it was incredible. And
Pride with you was incredible.
It was so beautiful to see Traverse City celebrating in that way. And I attended a bunch of Prides last year on the campaign trail in Traverse City, not only because it was my hometown was it so special, but it was so special because it wasn't corporate.
Right.
There, you know, no corporate sponsorships, no big marching bands, no floats. It was just thousands of people marching down Front Street saying, here I am, see me and treat me equally. And this is who we are. And when Peter and I were talking about maybe getting a little lake house to escape to, I mean, I've always wanted to come back to Traverse City in some capacity. You know, my family's here. I'm a very family-oriented person. I think they're having a little watch party across town with those Morsels, grapefruited judges, which is awesome. You know, and this is home. It will always be home. And Peter loves it up here. And so I'm glad we got a little sliver of respite up here.
Well, I'm so glad for that too. I know that there was maybe a time in your life when you wouldn't have felt that Northern Michigan was as welcoming to you as it is now. And I'm glad for all the things that led to that. One of the really beautiful things about your book, and for those of you who don't know, this book is available at Horizon Books. They sold out today, but they will have more copies tomorrow at noon, which I don't expect will necessarily be signed, but you know. And then they'll have more on Monday. So if you can't make it tomorrow at noon, then you can make it on Monday. And if you mention the National Writers Series, there's a 20% discount on the book. So make sure you order it. If you are not in Traverse City, you can also go online, Horizon Books. One of the things I love about your book so much, Chasten, is that it is a profound coming of age story, of course, but also one that takes us from a place of such profound and in some ways very affecting shame to one of very profound and very affecting, in a positive way, pride. And I think about our world right now and how divided everyone is and how everyone's on different places in our conversation. And I wonder if you have a message for the people that you just want to say, like, you know, it's going to be okay. Like, that's one of the things that you said in the book, is it's our job, it's the job of politicians to tell people that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And as a junior high school teacher, I imagine that's a huge part of your job, is being like, it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay if other people commit to making it okay for you. There's only so much you can do for yourself. And yes, there was a lot of shame and darkness and sadness in that book. But the reason I'm here today, the reason I survived, the reason I made it out, the reason I am who I am today is because other people rolled up their sleeves and did the work for me as well. So I ran away from home. My parents called me home. My parents didn't have any of the answers, but wanted to make a safe space for me. They were terrified for me, but they didn't give up on me. I came out to friends, lost some, and then other friends made more space for me. And, I went through college, finally found a mentor who picked me up and said, I see what's going on here. I'm going to fight for you too. And all along the way, it's been other people showing up to help. And that is the job of allies. It's all of our jobs, because we all have to be allies to everyone around us. But it wasn't just like grit and determination, right? I didn't write a book that was like, and I picked myself up by the bootstraps and everything's great. It's a story about other people taking chances on you, and other people giving you agency and space to be yourself. That way I could come into my own being, right? The way I could be myself, that way I could ultimately be loved by the person who loves me the most. And it will be okay, because especially when I come home to Traverse City and I walk down Front Street and I have goosebumps because there's rainbow colors on Front Street, right? And that's not because like Traverse City West grad Chasten Buttigieg like ran for president with his husband and made Traverse City better. That's because people here in Traverse City made it better. That's because people were here committed to the work.
Well, we founded Up North Pride in 2014, and I read that portion of your book to my spouse tearfully, just because we moved back here and knew that it was a necessity. So I love the fact that your story is a success story and is one of celebration, and is one of, it's not a story of someone who met life's challenges and then said, okay, I'm going to lay down and give up. But I do think that it's also interesting, that here we are in this town that both of us graduated from high school. I graduated from high school much earlier than you, my fine young man friend. And it was very difficult to be queer in Traverse City then. I graduated in 1991. And I think even the changes that have happened since you graduated have been really notable. But it is a challenge to us as adults and as citizens to be aware of the needs of people who have fewer resources. And I think that's sort of what you're saying, is like a lot of your success comes from people who had more privilege than you did, kind of sticking their necks out for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's awesome.
And then when we realize that we have privilege,
right,
in many different ways, then it's our job to turn around and stick our necks out for other people. And part of growing up in Traverse City was, like I write in the book, I was so concerned about my specific struggle, my reality, my lived experience. I was only focused on, we can give ourselves a little bit of, credit. We're teenagers, but like my struggle, it is hard being queer. Nobody loves me. The world seems crushing. And I never had to examine the world outside of the bubble of Traverse City, Michigan. And even the smaller bubble that I was living in inside the bubble of Traverse City, Michigan.
Yes.
and where I got to go away, I went to college, I went to grad school and taught in bigger cities and had a multitude of lived experiences. And sometimes when I come back into the bubble and like smaller bubbles inside the bigger bubble, you realize that some people still aren't there because they don't realize what you just said, that they might have to turn around and stick their neck out for somebody else
Right.
because of the very privileged bubble that they're operating in.
Yeah. Well, and it's so interesting in your book, you talk a lot about all of the different factions of Americans that you interfaced with and the different ways that that changed you. I wonder if there's anything that kind of coming home, having published your memoir, that is like, you know, glaringly obvious from the campaign trail, or something that really, that just comes with you every day, like something that you think of every day. You're just like, oh, that was the thing that I had to write down.
You mean about Traverse City in general?
What about Traverse City, or yeah, from your adventures?
Well, I guess what I'm thinking a lot about is, oh boy, you just like slid a soapbox out for me to stand on.
Oh, please stand on it. We want you here. We want you here.
I went out there and I just, once I got past all the, worries I had about like, who am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to wear? Am I too gay, not gay enough? Like, are people going to hate me? Are people going to like, once I just like let all that go
Right.
and focus squarely on the people in front of me and how I can make their lives better, or even just show up for them, I realized like in these like 4-H halls in the middle of Iowa, in the winter, people are showing up in their boots and they're listening to my husband talk about how he's going to make their life better. And I remember vividly like watching the conversations happen in front of me, right? Like farmers are asking about soy and corn and how he's going to protect small farms and family farms. And teachers are worried about the classroom, and moms demand volunteers are showing up asking about gun violence. And we're having these like real world lived experience conversations about how politics makes our life better or worse. And then I'm scrolling through Twitter in the back of the room, right? And Twitter's like, this politician said this, and like Pete did a fundraiser in a wine cave. And then like, I know he's going to go to the press gaggle the moment he ends that speech, and all they're going to talk about is
that thing on Twitter
and Twitter drama. And like he said, she said, and that's like the media ecosystem we're operating in. And I'm out there having real conversations with people about how my husband is going to make their life better in Washington. And I think about that when I come home. And I see people lamenting about their neighbors flying a Trump flag, or their neighbors not being able to have a civil conversation, or lamenting about what the city is and isn't yet. And I think about how the way we change those dynamics is not arguing with one another on social media. Because when you're on social media, you're just talking at one another. You're not talking with one another. So if you really want to like do the work, if you really want to push this community forward, then you might have to start talking to your aunt at Thanksgiving who has some pretty weird opinions about, politics in general. You might have to have a conversation with your son's teacher who keeps saying maybe racist, bigoted, homophobic things in the classroom. That's how you cause progress, not just by like retweeting an article and like getting mad online. And so I've been thinking about that as we've been spending more time in Michigan. I've been spending a lot of time here walking around the community and talking to people about politics. And the one thing I keep telling people is, who are you talking to? Because if you're going home, like Twitter activism, Twittervism, that's not going to do it. That's not going to win you an election.
Right.
So I hope that people think about in a multitude of ways. Do I want to push my community forward? Do I want to win this election, et cetera, et cetera? It's going to come down to the conversations that you're willing to get comfortable being uncomfortable having.
Yeah. Well, and that leads kind of interestingly, and hopefully not too uncomfortably, into like, how are things with you and your family since the book has come out?
Great. Mom and I went to Morsels today to pick up those morsels. Thank you, Morsels. The thing that I love about my parents and my family in general is, and I wrote about it in the book because I think it's important, they are a masterclass in hope for people just trying to get it right.
That's awesome.
And when I came out, they didn't have the answers, but they had a lot of questions. And the thing is, like, I get to run away from Traverse City and come back, right? And they live here. This is where their business is. This is where their home is. This is where our family is.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still here operating in that same bubble that I so desperately wanted to leave. And now I so desperately want to be back in. But they continuously show up and have the hard conversations. And I think growing up here, you know, the way we sort of operated was like, you don't talk about religion, you don't talk about, you know, politics, you like keep all your emotions locked up right here, right? And like, as John Mulaney says, like, and then one day you'll die. And like, that's it. Like, we don't talk about our feelings at all. And then, you know, things changed, and I shattered expectations for my family. And we keep having those conversations, and we can keep coming back to the table, having uncomfortable conversations, because we know that we love one another, and we know that's the way we learn and unlearn and progress.
How is there anything that the media has reported about you or about your family that you wish you could kind of set correct?
I mean, I'd have to go open a bottle of wine and we can go for an hour.
You're like, well, there was the time they said that I was a blonde.
I remember one time they said I was a millionaire, and I was like, that'd be nice.
Right. There's a whole thing about your net worth.
Like, yeah, me and all my student debt.
Would be great.
The only thing that really irked me, that I think if anyone's watching and they didn't know, was my parents never kicked me out.
Right.
And I see people try to retell that story, and in a way, I know they're trying to empathize with me, and they're trying to say, you know, look at what has happened since. But it's very important for me, especially it's very important because I know my parents still live here, and lots of people know who they are, and they want to have conversations with them.
And they're probably watching this.
They are watching right now. Yeah, it's probably like the Super Bowl over at their house.
Jerry and Terry.
My parents never kicked me out.
Yeah.
I ran because the culture I was growing up in and the things that I was hearing and learning from other people, even people in social circles around my family and at school, told me that I was disgusting. It told me that I was broken and that I didn't belong. And this was also at the time of Matthew Shepard.
Right.
And I thought, I sort of like felt it in my bones that if I come out, not only will I be a disgrace to my family will lose friends. I'll never be able to show my face.
Be a danger to them?
What's that?
Did you feel like you would be a danger to them by coming out?
Not a danger to them. I felt like if I came out, some of the people that I had grown up around might do something bad to me. Yeah. And it was a deep sense of shame that pushed me away. So I think it's because that we're very used to sort of reading the story of like the parents kick the kid out and the kid runs away and the kid becomes a Broadway star, right? Like that's like the hallmark
That was
movie.
your plan though, right? Still could happen.
But wouldn't that be nice? But that's not how life.
I'd buy tickets.
How the story went, and
that was really in your book you say very clearly, like they didn't kick. I wasn't unwelcome there. I was just afraid, and I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much to that. I mean, if we lived in a world that was more openly accepting, that was the norm, which, you know, from my mouth to God's ear, but there would be a sense of coming out to your parents that would just be like, oh, I informed them of a thing, you know?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. My parents didn't even have the vocabulary for it.
Right.
And when some of those early conversations were really awkward because it was like, well, here's the only few things we know about being gay, right? But at least we had them.
Devil hell.
Right? I mean, we had them. We had those conversations. And now, I mean, it's like we said at the beginning, it's so important for parents to, and I know it can be uncomfortable, and we have to do this for our friends too, say, this is going to be uncomfortable. I love you very much. And if there's ever anything you want to tell me about who you are or what you believe, I'm here for you. And I will always be here for you. And I will always love you. And I will always be your parent. And that will save kids' lives, because I grew up for 18 years thinking, I'm going to be the biggest disappointment and fear for my parents.
Like when they find out, like everything's fine right now, but when they find out, right?
Correct.
Well, what a delight it's been to watch you and your mom on your Instagram stories.
Thank you.
Um, I'm I'm heartened by
Oh,
her
this
support of you.
picture.
Hmm?
I see the photo they're putting up. Oh.
Oh, come on, you kids. Now, how old was your mom when she had you?
I believe my mom was 22 when she had me.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
There you go. I know that Pete has a book coming out in the fall. There was this cute image in my head of the two of you with like desks facing each other, kind of like, I don't know, playing playing some like, virtual game of who finishes their book first. Did you spend any of your time writing your book together?
I wrote most of, I mean, the thing
No, I
that's
did mine first.
so privileged to have during the isolation is space, right? I made a office upstairs. He had one downstairs, and we never shared. So when he wrote his first book, he never shared the chapter about me, and I never shared the chapter about him. But beyond that, I really needed his help because I'm still sort of a political newbie. So
Right.
everyone was reading the book, the legal team was reading the book, and the
Okay.
political team's reading the book. And
So there was nothing hidden that came out in your book that you're like, already there'd been 50 people who read it.
there's been I mean, there were a lot of opinions, but I said, I'm writing the book I want to write. And thank God that Pete was like, write that book, because
Awesome.
nobody, that people don't write books like that in politics.
Right.
And, people had some strong opinions about what you should share and what you shouldn't share.
Mm-hmm.
But Pete was very helpful towards the end when I, finally said, okay, I think this is it, and there were a couple times where he would say, this isn't complete. This isn't even close to complete, because I know you have more to say about this. And then also, I didn't want to write a burn book. This book isn't about dragging people through the mud and making people feel bad about anything.
For yourself, I would say, because I feel like there's a way that you could kind of take some of your past and be pretty, self-deprecating with it.
Oh, for sure. I just wanted, and Pete was very helpful with this.
Good.
I want the reader to feel what I was feeling. I don't want the reader to focus on the person that caused the pain. I want them to feel the pain with me. And all I want them to focus on is the thing that I was feeling and not the person who caused those feelings, if that makes sense.
I think you really succeeded, Chasten. I think it's a beautiful book. It's very accessible. You're generous with your audience. It's very readable. And a lot of the things in the book are so universal. And that was one of the things that I was wondering is, do you keep a journal, or did you keep a journal while you were on the campaign trail? Because there's some things that you're like, wow, you thought that was a good memory.
Yeah, it was helpful to go back. I talked with my body woman, Emily, quite a bit afterwards, but the best journal was Google Cal. I would go back and go through my days and see these days
Like,
that
right.
4 a.m. and ended at midnight, and just kind of, oh yeah, I went there. Oh yeah, I went there. I'd find like random notes on my phone. I was not very good at journaling along the way. I wish I would have been better at journaling, but I was also writing the book while we were on the campaign trail. So a lot of it was making its way into early drafts.
Like just capturing moments as they happened and such.
Oh, you'd have these like hilarious moments, and I would look to Emily and I'd be like, don't let me forget that. Or
that really happened.
You'd get in the car and be like, like, I have to write this right now or it's going to go away. Oh, look, this picture. This is one of my favorite photos of the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Not just because I look cute in that sweater, but this is like, this was your life. You get off a bus, and on the bus were journalists, and then like you get off and there's all these cameras and staffers, and everything you do is on camera, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what I wanted people to feel in the book, was just like that pressure of always being on. And I remember right where we were getting ready to walk into a pancake house.
Nice.
In New Hampshire.
You're like, we're about to have some amazing pancakes.
Oh no, you never eat.
Yeah, you didn't get to eat. You just went past the pancake house. Oh, I feel like your story has such universal experiences in it. Some, housing insecurity. I grew up working class as well. Enormous student debt. Limited freedoms. there's a part of me that just can't help but wonder what your current self would say to your younger self who was in such a state of shame and fear around those things. Is there a message you would send young Chasten to just be like,
Oh.
you know, your, hey, it gets better message, but to yourself?
Yeah, someone asked me in one of the first interviews about the book, something I wasn't expecting. They asked about, you know, you write about suicidal thoughts.
Mm.
And I said, yeah, I feel like, you know, people with positions of power don't really talk about that. You know, people don't really open up about mental health. And then they asked me, so why did you stick around? Why did you hang on? And I know that I so desperately wanted to know what good felt like, because everything felt like a lie. Everything was, you know, I'm going to do this to impress my parents. I'm going to be on the honor roll to impress my parents. I'm going to be in 4-H so I can blend in with like the roughneck boys, and so nobody beats me up and everyone sees me as, you know, a good country boy. And I'm going to do everything that I feel like I can do to blend in. And it just all felt like such a lie. And I just wanted to know what it felt like on the other side. What would good feel like? What would it feel like to just know who I am and feel good about it, instead of always trying to be something that other people wanted me to be. And now that I know what good feels like, you know, if I could go back and look at that kid and put my hand on his shoulder and just tell him what good feels like, the way love feels like when someone sees you for who you are, and when your family embraces your quirkiness and your awkwardness and they love. I was so afraid to like dance, to share, and like I know I did it in front of my mom a lot, you know, like, but then I always felt like, is she ashamed of me? Is this bad if I like sing show tunes or laugh at Ellen DeGeneres on TV? Or, you know, it was all just like this constant shame and fear. And like now that I am surrounded by this family that loves me, and this husband who loves me, and in a job that makes me feel fulfilled, and I get to go to bed at night knowing like I'm doing the work that makes me feel good, I guess I would just tell young Chasten, like, just you wait. I mean, I know you're thinking about,
Like, hold on, buddy.
honestly, you know, it's because when it's good, it's so good.
I love what you said in your book when you said, I spent most of my life believing I'd keep these stories locked up forever, often feeling that they would be what prevented me from being anything other than broken.
Yeah.
I tear up thinking about that.
But don't we all feel, because we live in a society that tells us if it's not golden, it's broken. And it's, you know, oh, you have student debt, broken, medical debt, broken, you got your heart broken, you know, broken person, you have cancer, you're broken. I mean, I think of all of the things that even my family feels, right? That you are not a full human being. And that's just not, it's not true. And I felt so free when I was finally like, you know what? I've got a lot of student debt and I've got a lot of medical debt. And, you know, people have broken my heart and taken advantage of me. And I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up until 5 years ago when I went back to grad school. You know,
It's not a shameful thing at 26.
But how often are we told that you should feel shameful for not having it all figured out?
Right. Right. But I think there's so much in your story of even like how you were looking for a significant other that was just like, oh yeah, guys at 22 aren't into that. You know?
No. Oh my God. I
mean, some of it
just
just like
so many more
chapters.
that time in life, you know, because you go on these dates and you're like, what did you do? And they're like, oh, I went to law school and now I'm a lawyer at doobity doop ampersand and whatever. And like, oh, that's cool. I'm renting my apartment on Airbnb and I'm a substitute teacher and I've got like $100,000 in debt because I went to the emergency room. You know, it's like
one time. Yeah.
And if you feel like people are looking at you like, why don't you have your shit together? You know, and we're so often just made to feel like all of those things, that means you've messed up. And it's not true. It's all of those things are so uniquely American.
Right. Well, and I think that there's an aspect of your story that is it's an American story. It's an American success story. It's a story of someone who has moved from that place of shame and fear and self-loathing to a place of pride and self-esteem. And that's one of those things that I'm like, if you can find the key that cracks that particular code, Chasten, I mean, you'll be teaching at a lot of places, including Harvard. And I just think it's so cool. Like, how cool is it that you were having all these instabilities and insecurities, and now you're teaching as a fellow at Harvard, and there's internet rumors that you're a multi-millionaire? Like, what sucks about that, right?
Love that. We have quite a few student loans to pay off before we.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
But the reason I was a little tardy to this is because I was doing an event over at Harvard, and you can see in the students' faces when you talk about these things. You know, I'm there as a fellow with journalists and folks who've worked on campaigns for decades, and
Wow.
I'm just talking about a very different approach to politics, my experience in politics, but you can also see it reflected in the faces on that screen of many young people who understand that they are already being dealt a losing hand. And if we don't tackle those issues, and if we don't do it in a way that makes people feel like they belong, then we're all on the losing end.
Right. Well, and it's such an exciting thing to think, okay, well, this is the annoying question that I'll just get out of the way.
Okay.
Not at the beginning, but
no, I'm not.
Everyone wants to know, you know, what Pete's plans are. I know this isn't the time we're interviewing Pete about his book, but that was one of the things that I keep reading. There's a scroll. If you notice me looking this way, I'm reading the questions on the screen, and they're like, "What about Pete running again?" That is one of the I'm sure the questions that you get regularly is, what's next for you and Pete?
Yeah, I know people are going to watch this and they're going to retweet it, but I feel like I've got to get to a point where it's okay for me to say I don't care.
That's great.
I mean, it's honestly, what I care about is that he stays involved and he stays active and he keeps doing things that make him feel helpful. And I love seeing him active and tackling big thoughts. So I need him to do that, because not only is it great for the country because he's brilliant, it makes him happy. And as his husband, I want to see him happy. But I'm focusing on me right now. And I campaigned for my husband for 1.5 years. I talked about him incessantly. And then I'm doing me right now. I'm enjoying this book tour. I'm enjoying connecting with people again. I know Pete is doing a ton of work for Biden right now. We're all trying to do as much as we can. But beyond that, I hope he stays active. I hope he stays involved. But I think I got to take a little more time to focus on me right now, you know?
Well,
Somebody asked me, they were like, today they sent me a text. They were like, I see he's doing this event on this day. I was like, I don't even check his Google Calendar anymore.
You're like, whatever.
Good for him, you know?
I love that you mentioned twice in the book that you might be, that at some point in your life, you had the theoretical thought that perhaps you would be the first man picking out White House china. And in my opinion, that was just like, I teared up, you know, as a queer person who grew up in this country and, you know, certainly didn't really think a Black man could be president. The thought of a gay man being president is also pretty exciting. So I wonder if any of those dreams feel dashed to you, or if there's any part of that you're like, but that was my play, you know, like, I don't know.
No, I mean, I feel an immense sense of pride in everything that we did. I mean,
Good.
I just don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm gonna get in trouble because I'm way too honest all the time. I mean, yeah, like I would have loved to have done that. I would have loved to have had that platform and done all the things that I talked about doing in that office. But I'm young, Peter is young, and we also put a lot of dreams on hold for him to run. And I just want to make sure I continue using my platform for good, and whatever that is. But am I mad that we lost? No. Do I feel like it was all worthless? No, because I met thousands of kids every day who would come up to me and like whisper in my ear, like, that's my mom behind you. And like, I haven't told her yet, but like, I'm getting there. Or parents who would come up and share with us that their kid held on a little bit longer because they thought this country was actually going to be a place where they felt like they belonged. We would meet couples who were twice our age, if not more, tell us they never imagined this day would come. And when people share that with you, that your campaign, the visibility of your campaign has saved their life.
Yeah.
That's I got to do that every day. Yeah. Every single day, I got to hug someone who shared their fears and their worries and their anxieties about themselves and their truths. And that was enough. I mean, I missed being in the classroom, but then I was out on the trail every day meeting kids like that, you know?
Well, in some ways, isn't that so much like the classroom? Like tending to young people's needs and tending to their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I at the end of the day, it's worth it. Totally worth it.
Well, I will hope for the best and be prepared to see you and Pete in many different ways as time unrolls, and we'll get to know you better. There was one of the first questions is, what's your favorite TV? This is from Ann. Ann Stanton wants to know what your favorite TV show is.
Right now I'm watching Schitt's Creek because I didn't get to finish it on the campaign trail. So Pete and I are watching that together.
Which doesn't that kind of, and for those of you who don't know, I don't mean to be rude, but did that inform any of your walking out on stage to Simply the Best by Tina Turner? Was that all like a moment for you when you were watching Schitt's Creek, or no?
Yeah, I was like, oh, it's the song. Yeah, no, it's a beautiful, beautiful show. I love it.
Yeah, what a wonderful piece.
I don't know if you can hear the dogs, but they're like.
I just hear their collars. I'm like, I know that one of them is like maybe a puggle and one of them's like a lab mix, but I'm a huge dog person, so if you want to just bring one up onto your lap, I'm into that.
You want to say hi? I always take their collars off, but
right. Oh, hi.
Hi.
Now, who is this?
This is Buddy. He's a pugger. He came to us with one eye. We rescued both of them, so I hope if anyone's thinking about getting a dog during quarantine, you adopt, don't shop.
Adopt, don't shop.
Okay, you're done? All right. He's
bye, buddy.
He's like a Zamboni. He's cleaning everything.
Like, I got stuff to do, Dad.
Right.
You know, one of the questions that we've had a lot of questions about, everyone wants to know where your Northern Michigan home is. What I've said is it's a lake house. It's their vacation home. That's all you need to know. So anyway, Mary McGonigal wanted Chasten to know, so proud of you, from Mrs. M from Blair.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I think that there were so many people who really appreciate the fact that you chose to be honest and real. There was a part in your book where you said, I was so focused on trying to do it right, I didn't realize what I was supposed to do is just be myself.
Right.
And what a universal message that is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't it be great if young Chasten could know that?
Right.
Just
Absolutely.
be yourself. Like, you're not doing anything wrong. All you have to do is be you. You might just have the wrong audience. People love Buddy.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. They appreciate that you pointed out that he only came with one eye. Many people would like to have you as our first gentleman.
Oh,
that was a question that I had. Was it weird for you on the campaign trail, or did you think it was cute that people continued with the first lady kind of commentary? They're like, oh, well, Chasten will be our first male lady.
Yeah, there were a lot of times when I felt, and the thing about being a spouse, if you've read the book, and I start right there in the introduction, to be a political spouse is to be everything and nothing.
Right.
You have to be on all the time, do not mess up, don't sink the ship, don't speak out of turn, but also be educated on everything, know everything that Pete has said.
Exist, don't exist at the same time.
Everything. And when people would ask questions that were very pointed, or questions that were just missing, well,
Context?
I should just say some inappropriate questions.
Maybe just rude.
Very confused about whether it was my place as the spouse to correct them or not, because I was afraid that if I would correct them, then the story would be about how I was disrespectful to the reporter.
Right.
And in the back of your mind, as the spouse, you're always thinking, I can't mess up. Do not cause a story, do not cause drama, because the Twitter sphere is where all of the journalists are. And the last thing we need is a tweet to say like,
Right.
Chasten was really rude. But there were some questions that were very gendered, and I felt and slightly homophobic and very invasive. Not slightly, some of them were very homophobic.
Right.
And I was always concerned, like, should I gently correct this person? And what was frustrating is sometimes they would ask questions like, do you think it's harder because you're a man? And that's a trap, right? Because you want to say like, how long do we have to unpack gender and gender roles? And some people would ask like, it must be much easier because you're a man. And then they would also say like, do you look forward to doing more than first ladies have done in the past? And what I hear in their language is saying women are only allowed to do certain things,
Right.
but now a man's going to be in the office. And I was so afraid of correcting them. But sometimes I would. And so like the cute language of like, you're going to be the first lady. I was always just more concerned about like what that kind of language does to younger or like young people or other people or queer people who are watching. And I guess it's not a direct question to your answer, but that was sort of the storm that was always brewing in my head, was like, get this moment right, don't mess up. But also, young people are watching everything that you do and say. And what does that tell them when you co-opt language of other people's genders
Right.
to make a joke about your position?
Well, I think you, from what I witnessed, handled it really lovely. And I would love it if you were our first gentleman at some point. So we have a bunch of questions coming in. There's
And
a lot of people who
I think I owe you 10 minutes too. So you don't,
we might keep you a little bit.
I feel bad I was late.
Don't be mad at us. I appreciate some people were like, let them have their privacy with where their house is. Many people are very excited about the dogs. From Drew, whose last name I will not attempt to destroy. From Drew, whose last name starts with an R, what chapter was the hardest for you to write?
The hardest part for me to write was the part about my grandma. We lost her shortly after Peter and I were married. And in a way, the early stuff, like the boyfriend drama and, the assault and, oh, there she is. Thank you for showing her photo. That's grandma. That's my mom's mom, Wanda. So if you've picked up the book, the dedication's for her.
Love that.
And so I was trying to get the emotions right of this time when I sat with her in her Buick and came out to her and what that felt like. And I was just like all tears. I could like barely see the keyboard. But I was like in it. I was in my feels and I wanted to get it right. And that was probably like the hardest part to like emotionally traverse, because all of the other stuff, like I've had years to process that, I've had my therapy. Therapy's great. That was a little raw. And then the campaign trail, it was like, that was just more, it felt like a job, right? Like how to get it right, how to share it with people in a way that feels genuine and authentic to me, but also in a way that is not going to cause my husband problems when people want to talk about the things that his husband wrote in his book. And I feel like I was able to find the right tone for the book and share as much as I could.
I would agree.
Yeah.
It's a lovely piece. And for anyone who hasn't yet picked up a copy, Horizon Books has a discount National Writer Series, available online. More copies arriving tomorrow. Leah B has a question for you, which was, what was something that you learned about the United States during your time as an exchange student?
You know, even as an exchange student, so I went on the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange Program, which was started in the 80s,
Sehr
trying
gut.
to get some cross-cultural, oh my God, we're showing that, aren't we?
So good.
You know, cross-cultural understanding between the two countries. And I didn't realize that, you know, they talked about being an ambassador of your country. But I didn't realize, like, I was the first American that a lot of people were going to meet.
Right.
And even at 17 years old, what a responsibility that is. And I remember, I almost got the crap kicked out of me on a bus once because the kids had a very strong opinion about our president at the time and the war. And you are all of a sudden an ambassador of your country and explaining war to other kids your age on the other side of the world. And so that was a tremendous responsibility, but also people just revered our country, like America, just like the idea of hope and, you know, the glitz, the glamour, everything to them is like Las Vegas and Times Square. And you also have to teach other people about, you know, flyover country. But that was quite a year. That could be a whole book in of itself.
I bet. Okay, well, there were a couple of people who wanted to thank you for coming to Pride last year. I would like to thank you as well.
Can't wait to go back.
Yes, may we all be back. Someone, Kate Sondgerath would like to know, how do you deal with siblings who have drastically different life, political, spiritual views from your own?
So I think, you know, especially if you're in the queer community, you are not a stranger to people failing to see your worth, your dignity. People who fail to understand that you're an equal human being in the eyes of the law and also in the eyes of your God. I think a lot of people struggle with family members or community members or coworkers who fail to see them as equal human beings. And so I guess when you're pursuing conversations or relationships with people, or you're navigating those relationships, and I got this question a lot on the campaign trail, you know, what do I do about my parents who aren't really accepting, or what do I do about, you know, this coworker who keeps saying these things about me and my wife? Those conversations are only worth having if you feel safe having them. And eventually, you know, because if you feel like that person might be open to understanding or might be open to some, you know, constructive feedback, then it's worth pursuing, right? We've all had that coworker who's like,
not worth pursuing.
There's not enough time or prayer, you know? And so I guess you'd start there, right? But then I would meet with people who would talk about, you know, they're in their 30s, their 40s, their parents have never seen them as equals. I guess there comes up, and I'm sorry if this is pessimistic, there comes a time in your life when you've got to decide what you're going to keep carrying. And are those people worth carrying? Because that's a lot of weight. That's very heavy to go to bed every night knowing that there are people in your life that you're holding on to who don't think that you're equal, who don't think that you deserve to be married, who don't think you deserve equal protection in housing or employment, who think that you are a creature unmade by God.
Yeah.
And eventually you've got to decide, can I let that person go? And I had to get there in my own life, thinking, you know what? I've got good. I found good. And if you're not willing to share in that good with me, bye, you know, because what's it to you? I mean, what are you getting out of it? Right. And I know that, I know my family is very nuclear. and we show up for our family, and we take care of our family, and we drop everything for our family. But if there's also someone who is unwilling to see your humanity, does the label family even still apply to them? And that's a decision we all have to make. But again, only putting ourselves in positions that make us feel comfortable, if this is someone you're living with or working with, etc. Because sometimes it's easy to just go about your day knowing that, like, Kathy over in the English department's a real homophobe, and you're probably not going to get very far with her at the copy machine, you know. Right. But if you have someone that you like just have to stomach and see every year at Thanksgiving, you can probably just decide, like, they're not on my team, and that's okay, because I've got a pretty remarkable team over here.
Yeah. Well, you have assembled a remarkable team, and you have a remarkable story, and you tell it beautifully, Chasten. I really hope you feel proud of your book.
Yeah.
We have a couple more questions here, so if you don't mind.
You got it.
There was a question here of someone who wanted to know, talking about medical expenses and how difficult it is to kind of pay for those sorts of things. Just the person notes, you know, it's really not a shame to have medical expenses. It's a shame that we have to be ashamed that we have medical expenses. I was just wondering if you had any comment on that. Just it's such a common experience, something that so many Americans face.
Yeah, I just went to the doctor today, and it's always in the background, like, God, I hope, you know, everything's covered. Right. We shouldn't have to operate. We shouldn't have to live with that fear. It was painful growing up, going through the drive-through at Walgreens. Yeah. And having the woman say, like, oh, you know, Sherry, my mom, it looks like this one, you know, Blue Cross isn't picking it up. So did you want to pay with card or check or cash today? You know, like, oh, how much is it? It's like, it's $2,300. Like,
right. And your mom has had a skin cancer condition that's been...
Yeah, mom has a pretty rare form of skin cancer. You know, so most people have like a spot or two. She has hundreds, and they regenerate, they come back. You know, it's getting worse and worse. And so as a kid, watching her sort of navigate all of and especially in the early days when we didn't know exactly what was going on. And, right. You know, and even that one night I went to the emergency room, I try not to paint it with too much color in the book, because we all don't need all those details. But, you know, you're in a position where you're like, I really need to go to the emergency room. And the whole time you're there, you're not thinking like, I hope I'm going to live. You're thinking, I hope I'm going to survive the bill.
Right.
After that. And people
I hope I can afford this.
Right. People shouldn't have to. And I believe it. That's why our country needs to move in the direction of universal health care. But we don't have enough time to have that debate.
Right. Well, there's a couple. Yeah, let's get to education next.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the areas that I do think a lot of these questions come into. You know, people have questions about your perspective on education reform in this country, and is there anything specifically that you're interested in seeing happen or that you're specifically working on?
Yeah, I mean, I think Peter stole my line on the campaign trail, but we should, you know, be treating our teachers more like we treat our soldiers, and paying them more like we pay our doctors. I would love to see, you know, some federal weight behind that. I would love to see, you know, our training programs revamped. I would love to see it be an easier field for people to go into, and a less expensive field to study. Less testing, because testing only tells you so much. And I feel like if we're equating what a school's worth is to how a student took a test one day, then we're not really invested in their growth. I would love to see children be afforded the opportunity to experience the arts more. The arts saved my life. It was my only safe space in school. Oh man, get off the soapbox, Jess.
So
we don't have all night.
Well, I would like to loan you a little tidbit, which is I always say that the arts are the fourth wing of government, because they make a record of what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think
imagine going through all of this past year,
Yeah.
Without your Netflix subscription, without being able to watch television or movies or listen to new music. I mean, this country relies on the arts and we need to
Yes.
invest in them.
Yes. A question that was repeated a couple of times, initially from Sarah Hard. As a fellow teacher, any advice for virtual learning and teaching? Any thoughts on students' mental health during this time?
Yeah, depending on your grade. So I've been thinking about, if I was back in the middle school classroom, what would I be thinking about? A few things is just cut yourself a ton of slack.
Mhm.
This is new for everybody. So I think it's really important that you be upfront and honest with your students. Like, I don't know everything about Zoom. I don't know everything about the internet. Like, it's going to suck. You can make fun of me. It's fine. But like, we're all in this together and we all
Right.
don't want to be doing this. Don't gauge student participation by the looks on their face. I have resting teacher face, also known as something else. And sometimes I catch myself on Zoom and I'll be like, because I'm listening intently.
Sure.
Uh, and then you see your face on Zoom and you realize like, oh, people might think I'm really mad. So
I have resting
don't make
teacher
kids
face too.
don't make kids turn on their camera if they don't want to turn on their camera. I mean, this is going to be really uncomfortable because you're asking kids to
Be
take you into their
vulnerable.
home, and that can be really vulnerable for other kids. And so there's going to be a really big learning curve for everyone
Hmm.
before you might even get to the learning. And
Right.
it's really important to build their trust via the virtual platforms. But cut yourself some slack. Parents too, if you're homeschooling or, everyone's got full-time jobs and you're trying to run a house. I mean, so what if your kid hasn't stuck to a strict regimen for learning? Just spark their curiosity and keep going with them. But you got to be in it together.
Yeah. Well, we have a note here from Lynn Larson, local beloved high school teacher.
Oh, she taught my parents.
And she said, I had both of Chasten's parents as students at TC Central
Yeah.
and me. I want to assure him that they didn't know exactly what they wanted to do when they were 17-year-olds either. They are good, fine people.
Yes, they are.
Isn't that lovely to hear from one of their teachers
Yeah.
who's profoundly liberal, by the way? Interesting. Anyway. So this is your first book.
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder, was writing this book kind of like a birthing experience where you like, okay, after that's over, I don't want to do that again, or I can't wait to do that again. Like people have different experiences about their first book.
I did not think I could write a book. And so, when people, the publisher, the agent, they're all pushing you to write a book. And I just did not feel, again, like political espousing, I just didn't feel like I could do it. And I ultimately just wrote a book my way. And I was really nervous that people wouldn't like it because I felt this pressure, sort of the same way I felt the pressure to be a certain type of person on the
Sure.
political campaign trail. Stepping into, books, my husband wrote an amazing book, which was like reviewed as like the best political memoir since Barack Obama's. It was like, okay, I don't
That
write
doesn't.
like that. That's not who I am. And I'm not going to write a book like that. I'm not going to use 5 adjectives to describe like the wind, the
But
morning
he wrote his book, right? I mean, that's the thing, is you wrote your book.
He wrote his book, I wrote my book. And I think to know me is to know that I'm a little all over the place. I'm pretty loud. I love entertaining people, and I wanted people to feel like, okay, if we were like going out to get coffee or we're getting a drink and you're sitting across from me and you were just like, so like, what's your life? That's how I see people in the comments saying that shade. That's not shade. That was not shade. He's a brilliant human being that writes a very different way than I do.
Right.
And I finally found power in my own voice, not just the story, but my voice. So like, this is the book I'm going to write. And I want people to just feel like they're getting to know me and I'm telling them stories. And I really hoped that it would be like a breezy read, a quick read, and just like punch you in the gut with the feelings and then like move on and go to something else, and like, this is my life. And it's not well packaged. There's not like a pretty little bow on top, and I feel like people don't write books like that
Well,
there's,
I think
it can be muddy and sticky and confusing and awkward. And I wish I would have had that book when I was younger. And so that's just
absolutely.
the book, that I wanted to write, and I did, and I'm glad my husband encouraged me to do it, and I'm so glad my editor saw that, and
Yes.
people believed in that.
Well, and I think you can believe in your book because in telling your story in an intimate and personal way, you share universal truths. I mean, who doesn't need that message? Even people who are maybe feeling successful and nailing it, that, yeah, sometimes you feel like you're just lost and not doing it right.
Yeah.
And I think that there's some real beauty in that. And looking at you now, you're such a charismatic and self-possessed fellow. I mean, it's like, okay, of course you're teaching at Harvard, right? Like, are you also on a daytime soap opera maybe? Because that's not. People have a lot of questions about the Harvard gig. Everyone's like, Harvard, Harvard, Harvard. So, do you have anything in particular that you would like to share about that experience? Or
Yeah, it's just the Institute of Politics at the Kennedy School at Harvard, and we just host. I'm not teaching a class; it's just a fellowship. So we host a study group, and it's basically me, just a fellowship, just hosting students for conversations. So there's no homework. We're just talking about politics, and I'm alongside journalists and other political operatives, and I
you're like, no big deal.
fellowship that all politics is personal, and my experience of politics is very different, and we should harness our own stories and our truths and share our vulnerabilities and know exactly who we are before we stand in front of someone and ask them to vote for us or for somebody else.
Right.
So it's just a very different take, and I'm really pleased that they believed in that take. And then I get to share that opportunity. And I'm also just happy to be back in the classroom in a certain way, like learning from other people and being in that environment.
Well, teaching is such an exciting way to learn, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's such a beautiful thing. Um, any last bits that you'd like to share with the beloved audience who's just showering you with most of the comments here, just so you know, like, great smile, we love you, Chasten, you're so awesome. And then when you said the thing about shade, it was like 30 comments, shade, 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 shade. Like everyone's like, yes, just so you know.
I would never throw shade at my husband.
Maybe just once.
I'm so grateful to this community. And the people who make it what it is. And I know it can be pretty dark out there. And it's not always what we want it to be. But I am so grateful for people who are doing the work here and saving lives. I mean, Elon, yourself, the things that you are doing, the young people that you are inspiring. I mean, the ripple effect that you have to this community, you might not even feel. But when kids in Traverse City, Michigan can go downtown and see, a rainbow flag. I mean, I remember when the We Are Traverse City sticker happened.
Yep.
And the homophobic outcry of simply having a rainbow on a city vehicle. I mean, think about what that did to us. I mean, it shoved me further into the closet and told me this community will not accept you. And now, like, think about the kids who are walking downtown. I mean, think about the people who are driving out in Leelanau County, or out on the west side and seeing maybe Trump flag, and then an up north pride flag. What that means at the end of somebody's rural country driveway when you are a kid riding in the backseat of your parents' car, thinking terrible things about yourself because you're not sure if this community is going to love you or not. So my gratitude to everyone in Traverse City who is taking a risk and helping Traverse City become a better version of itself. I was talking to a woman earlier this year about the Up North Pride signs, and she made this comment. She said, I could never put one in my driveway. My neighbors would kill me. And the fact that, like, that symbol, well, let me say this. That symbol can do so much good. It will save lives. It might seem like a flimsy piece of plastic to you. But if I was that kid riding in my dad's truck at 13 years old and I saw that in Long Lake Township, if I would have seen that out in Grand, I can't tell you what that would have done for me.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for every neighbor who is committed to the cause up here, and just know I'm in it with you. Beyond that, I hope, if you haven't picked up the book, I would love for you to read it. I would love for you to give a copy to a young person who might benefit from it And I hope if you do purchase the book, you purchase from one of our local retailers. It's a really tough time out there for books right now. And there's some big websites online that will sell it to you for cheaper. But there are people right here in your community who really need the help. So if you would consider purchasing from a local bookseller, I would really appreciate that. And then I'll go right back to what I said at the beginning. You can save lives if you're willing to tell people that you're going to fight for those lives. And so we all have a responsibility as allies. I think that's what this book is at its core, is just a message of allyship and showing up for other people and how we can influence other people's stories and lives. So please tell the people that you love them, and that you were there for them. I will never forget a friend. I was sitting at West End Beach, talking to a friend, coming out to a friend, and I just remember her saying, like, I'll fight like hell for you. And what happens when we tell people that. So thank you, Elon, for having me. The Writer Series, thank you for inviting me. Thanks for being in the story. It's been great.
Such a treat to have you, Chasten. Such a treat to be in conversation with you again. And I so look forward to your next book.
Thank you. And if you see us around town, please say hi. Only if you come up and say, look at Pete really confused and say, aren't you Chasten's husband?
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Will do. Just so you know, like, I made a whole, like, I put, like, you have a timeline, like, I have your whole life history on paper here. Like, there's a deep dive into your material. Yeah. I do. I love doing visual aids just for myself.
I love it. Well,
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chasten. What a treat it has been to have you here. And yes, please tell your husband, whatever his name is, that we're looking forward to his book, I guess.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah, if his book comes out at some point.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
As far as National Writers Series news, please tune in Sunday at 2 p.m. Ruth Ware is going to be here, zooming in from England with her book that is now out, the thriller One by One, often touted as the Agatha Christie of our time. And again, all of Chasten's first round of books sold out at Horizon Books, but they're getting... they're getting 150 copies at noon tomorrow. Have your signing hand ready, Chasten. And there will be more available on Monday. So pick up your copy of this book. It's a beautiful telling of a really beautiful success story of a life of this wonderful gentleman in front of us now. And I just thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Elon. I really appreciate it. I'll see you soon.
What a treat. I hope so. Thank you.